Hey, it's me, Deborah Rowe. I wanted to take a minute here just to say I'm still around, but I haven't been doing my podcast because I have been down and out with the flu. I'm actually just getting to the point where I can talk for a few minutes without going into a coughing spasm. So, I learned a little lesson. I will add this. I was working on my podcast, oh gosh, a couple weeks ago. And I put it down and I came back a couple of days later and said, let me finish it. Okay. I was starting to feel bad and I really just went and took a nap. Of course, the next day I had the flu. I probably had it already. Here's the point. Had I finished that podcast then, I wouldn't have found myself feeling so overwhelmed. Like, why didn't you finish it? Why? I thought I'd go back into my archives and I'm going to repost this particular podcast. Not just to put up a podcast, but because in this podcast, I do talk about wildfires. We kick it off with the Canadian wildfires, but I do get into talking about California and California's land management issues and some of the things that are going on with it. So I thought that would just be appropriate for right now. Take a listen to that. This particular podcast is from June 29th of 2023. It's titled I still having trouble with that word, A Few Observations. I talk about a few things there, but if you want to just skip and get straight to the wildfires portion of the podcast, I think that starts around 9:40. Otherwise, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much. You're helping me to grow my podcast. It's slow growth, but it is growing. So please share, subscribe, and enjoy. Now, without further ado,
On your mark.
On your mark.
Get set.
Get set.
Now ready.
Ready. Go. Provocative, engaging, and usually quite a lady.
Okay, they're asking for it.
Deborah Rowe.
today's podcast will be a show about observations. Some observations that I've had over the past couple of days, things that I've seen in the news, read about, heard about, and just want to share with you. I think there are about 4 of them. And the 4 include Canadian wildfires, Madonna, Joe Biden's commencement address to Howard University, a particular genre of television shows, and this one, the one I'll start with. A couple of days ago, actually it was yesterday, I ran into 2 people. I know them both. They're not personal friends, but they're people that I am friendly with. I've noticed this about both of them repeatedly. Every time I encounter them, they smell like skunks.
Youch, that stinks!
I mean, I know that they don't have body odor or anything like that, but I'm just guessing that they smoke marijuana. And I'm just floored by how many people walk around smelling like a skunk. And I'm not even trying to be funny. I think that either they don't realize how awful they smell, or they just don't care. Either it's more important to them to get high than it is to smell like you're part of a civil society. And the thing that really, really gets me is that I'm not talking about young people. I'm not talking about some teenager or even a college student. The 2 people I'm talking about, I think they both are grandparents. I'm serious. And I'm like, come on. You go to the store, you go to the gas station, you go into a fast food restaurant, and there it is, the whiff of skunk. And it's just not cool. And I actually did try and do some research about this. And I know that there are different, I don't know if there's strains, variations. I'm not hip. I'm not up on current marijuana. I'm just not. But I guess some have a stronger odor than others. I guess the more potent that the variety is, the more it smells. And another thing I noticed too, and not just based on the two from yesterday, but from other people, back in the day, and I almost hate to use that phrase, back in the day, when people smoked marijuana, when you got high, you were fun. You were laughing. You were giggling. Things were humorous. You just wanted to have a good time. You could just see the dumbest thing ever, and it would just crack you up. But these people today, not only do they smell like skunks, but they have like a skunky attitude too. It's like, yeah. And I'm thinking, what is the benefit of this? I'm just not understanding it. I had a friend from years ago. Every day he would smoke marijuana. Not just every day. He would smoke it throughout the day. He would smoke it on his way to work. He would smoke it after work. That was every single day. He never skipped a beat. Now, personally, I thought he was addicted to marijuana. And this, of course, went contrary to what everybody has said, that no, you can't get addicted to marijuana. But I think he was addicted. But at least he didn't smell like a skunk. I think that people should just wait until you get home and have no plans of coming back out for the night.
See, I get high later on when I come back. See, I get high at night when I get through with all my business.
And if I were Queen of the United States, I would be a fair queen, by the way. If you had to come back out for the night, the rule would be you must first take a bath and wash your hair and then come on back out. That's observation number 1. Number 2, when did America become so obsessed with talent competitions? Again, this is nothing earth-shattering. It's not going to make or break your world or my world. It's just an observation. I cannot believe how many shows are dedicated to talent. The Voice, American Idol, America's Got Talent. It goes on and on and on. I know some of these shows, they come and go. So you think you can dance. American Song Contest, The X Factor. And I just saw this, that Simon Cowell was saying that, well, he dropped a hint. He didn't specifically actually say it, but he hinted that The X Factor is going to return. And I'm thinking, is there any room for another competition, another talent show? I don't know when this happened, but at some point, something happened in America where suddenly everybody wants to be a star. Now, granted, there's always been a time where people wanted to make it big in Hollywood. Somebody wants to become a singer. They want to become an actor. And they get on these competition shows. But the thing is, we didn't have so many competition shows. There used to be, Star Search and Showtime at the Apollo. Those were your main two. And then I'll give honorable mention to The Gong Show, which is probably before both of them. But that was basically it. People were preoccupied with so many other things. But today, aside from all of those shows, all of the song and dance shows, and let me just say a word about American Idol, which I really don't watch, but every blue moon, I'll stop one channel surfing. And I've noticed something. They don't just rely on talent. They rely on the backstory, because I've seen it at least 2 times, maybe 3, where a contestant gets up and they have this very, very touching backstory. When I was growing up, nobody believed in me. Everybody would make fun of me. When I talked, people would stare at me, and I was so shy. And my mom, she just told me, stick with your dreams. Stick with them, honey. And then you'll see like Katy Perry, she's staring and tears start streaming. To me right there, it says, You know what? You're going to get the edge. You've had it tough. But besides that, we've got all of these other shows that are still competitive in nature, and I am a fan of competition. In fact, I'm pretty darn competitive myself. But there's Last Comic Standing, RuPaul's Drag Race. Remember America's Next Top Model, Project Runway, Dancing with the Stars. Okay, Dancing with the Stars, that one's okay. Even The Masked Singer, I'll give that one kudos to. Lego Masters, really? That's a TV show? But it is. And it just goes on and on and on. And I was looking on the internet, looking for new talent competition shows that are coming. And I think there's something new coming. So the point is, when did we become so obsessed with talent shows? Now, there is another talent show that I really do like, and that is The Iron Chef. Okay, it's still a competition show, but it's different, and that's good. How about we do a talent show based on the script Spelling Bee? Ooh. Okay, maybe not. Besides, you'd already know who the winner would be. No need to watch the season finale. What? I'm not saying anything out of sorts. Do you realize that of the last 23 Scripps National Spelling Bees, Indian American students have won 21 of those competitions? I think that's incredible. I think it's amazing. And on another podcast, maybe we'll go into why that happens. Okay, moving on. Let's take a look at number 3. It's the Canadian wildfires. This is tragic in that there is so much landmass that's being damaged. I'm not going to say destroyed because ultimately it'll come back. It may take a very long time, but it will come back. Before getting into what I've observed, let's first take a listen to this report from CNN.
More than 80 million people from the US Midwest to the East Coast are under air quality alerts as smoke from Canadian wildfires sweeps across the border. Chicago and Detroit had the worst air quality in the world throughout the day Tuesday, according to IQ Air. Officials in the US are warning of reduced visibility and closing some public spaces.
Wow, this is pretty insane, guys. This is not fog. This is smoke.
Canadian authorities say more than 200 wildfires are burning out of control right now. This was the view from farms in Wisconsin on Tuesday. The smoke is expected to linger for the next few days. It's Canada's worst ever fire season and has led to the country's highest emissions on record.
This is no doubt a very serious matter. It matters to the environment, and it, of course, matters to us, particularly people who have respiratory issues, people dealing with all kinds of medical and health issues. They have to be concerned about this, and they really should stay indoors as much as possible until all of this passes by. The thing that I have observed, though, is how many times and in a number of articles that you will read about the Canadian wildfires is how climate change is contributing to this. Well, that may be. I really don't know. I'm not a scientist. I don't ever want to pretend to be one because I'm not one. I saw an article that said that because of climate change, over the next few years, we can expect to see wildfires increase by 50%. And that may be as well. But here's really my point. I want to be very, very careful, and I want everybody to be really careful not to stoke fear. Because to me, a lot of the discussion about climate change is based in fear. And I think some of this is pseudoscience. I just do. Hey, but you just said you're not a scientist. You don't have to be. You can also utilize some common sense. You can use research, your own research. You can listen to other experts, and you can come to your own conclusions. Now, having said that, I want to go back here because I wanted to share something. I was taking a look at an article from earth.org, and you can take a look at it yourself. It's the top 12 largest wildfires in history. I'm not going to read the entire article. I'm just going to run down the list. Number 12, the 1989 Manitoba wildfires, 1.3 million acres. Of course, that's in Canada. 2011, the Richardson Backcountry Fire, also Canada, 1.7 million acres. We can get up to 1987, Black Dragon Fire. That was in China and Russia, covering portions of both. 2.5 million acres burned during a wildfire. Then there was, here, in 1910, the Great Fire of Connecticut, 3 million acres burned during a wildfire. Let's take a point right here because there was no discussion about climate change in 1910, but that was a major fire. Now, granted, we are talking about 19 million acres today with this wildfire in Canada. In 2010, Bolivia forest fires destroyed 3.7 million acres. In number 7, 1950, another fire in Canada, the Chachanga fire, or the Chachaga fire rather, also known as the Wisp fire, 4.2 million acres burned. The Great Fire of 1919, Canada, 5 million acres burned. 1939, Black Friday bushfire happened in Australia, 5 million acres. In 2004, the Alaska fire season, 6.6 million acres. Going on, 2014, Northwest Territories fires, of course, Canada, 8.5 million acres. We get over to number 2. This happened twice, 1919, and then again 2020, the Australian bushfires, 42 million acres, well over twice the size of the fires burning in Canada today. And then number 1 on the list happened in 2003, the Siberian Taiga fires, that of course being Russia, 55 million acres. The reason I'm pointing this out is because I think it's really, really easy to lose sight of something. We, as human beings, it's imperative that we are good stewards of our planet. It just is. We're supposed to do that. I think that's why God gave us the abilities that we have to be good stewards. However, be that as it may, I do not share the belief, the idea that we are to be servants to the earth, that we are to relinquish our lives, our lifestyles, just to serve the earth. Now, you may be thinking, well, Deborah, if we don't serve the earth is just going to go away. It's just going to be destroyed. Well, that's kind of part of the reason why I wanted to run down that list of the top 12 wildfires in history. Some of them were from the previous decade. Some were from the last century. Others almost 2 centuries ago. Well, there was one from the early 1800s. The point being, the earth has this crazy ability to rejuvenate itself. No, we don't want forest fires. We don't want hazy cities and suburbs and ocean waters that we can't swim in because we really can't see where we're going. We don't want that. But what we also don't want is to be burdened by extremely restrictive policies that'll cause us to give up our way of living, our way of life. Don't use gas anymore. Don't do this anymore. You're going to hurt the earth. The earth is going to be okay. Let me give you another example. Remember the BP oil spill? And I remember it vividly because it was horrible. News reports repeatedly said that the waters in the Gulf would not be usable for generations in terms of fishing, that wildlife would be destroyed and plants and all of this. Generations would pass before we would see life restored to the Gulf. Yeah, they were wrong. Yeah, they were wrong. An article from Scientific American, and it's titled How Microbes Helped Clean BP's Oil Spill. Like cars, some microbes use oil as fuel. Such microorganisms are a big reason why BP's 2010 oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico is not far worse. Quote, "The microbes did a spectacular job of eating a lot of the natural gas," says biochemist Chris Reddy of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. The relatively small hydrocarbon molecules in natural gas are the easiest for microorganisms to eat. The rate and capacity is a mind-boggling testimony to microbes, he added. He went on to suggest that the microbes got help from the nature of the oil spill, so-called Louisiana Light, sweet crude, mixed with natural gas, as opposed to some of the heavy, gunky oils. It was the easiest to degrade, he said, and they just loved it. They gorged themselves on it. Think about that. These microorganisms, they live at the bottom of the ocean. I remember that when I first heard it, I'm like, this is mind-boggling. So the point that I am making, make no mistake about it. We have to be good stewards of our planet. But I do know this. God, as creator, knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't create an earth that was not sustainable. This is a sustainable planet. And we have to be careful that we don't fall into the trap, and I feel it is a trap, of worshiping the earth. It's really here for our enjoyment. We have to treat it well and enjoy it. A couple of other quick points on this one. California, which also is prone to lots of wildfires, and of course other parts of the country as well. But for many years, California bowed to the pressure of environmentalists, the activists, the radical types, who have long been opposed to forest management. They have never liked the idea of prescribed burns, also known as controlled burns, but those are essential to maintaining a healthy forest. Because when you don't do the controlled burns and other things that are necessary, then all of this vegetation, it just grows. And that vegetation is life. And that vegetation is also fuel. It helps fires to burn rapidly when things get dry, and sometimes the environment gets dry. But they didn't want that. So we have seen an incredible number of wildfires, and I mean out of control wildfires in California. That's not really a coincidence. And it's not just me saying that. There's a really good article from NPR. Yes, NPR. It's from 2021, but it is about how the state of California is now considering following the state of Florida in its forest management efforts. And the reason this article is so good, and it is really, really good, is because it goes back through the history of forest management and how people in the South have always used a form of controlled burning so that they could have a safer environment. But it goes even further. They talk about the Native Americans. The Native Americans had a practice of controlled burning. They did it because it made for better land. It made for better opportunities to grow their foods, for hunting and all of that kind of stuff. It was just a practice. The Native Americans also relied on lightning to help clear some of the overgrowth. There have been groups that have been opposed to forest management for years. In fact, since the 1800s, and you'll find that in the article. But when you look at some of the numbers, and one of the numbers was really startling, California burns about 35,000 acres of land. By contrast, Florida burns well over 1 million acres of land every year. And California is twice the size of Florida. So, since wildfires have really become a serious issue, and I mean out of control wildfires that are hard to fight, that take days to put them under control, have become a real problem in California, finally, people are getting a clue. It should be mentioned, and I am going to mention it, that the last administration, they encouraged California to embrace forest management. The pushback came from all of the activists who were like, no way. Thankfully, those same activists are being met by a growing number of individuals, private landowners, and also Native American groups who are pushing for more prescribed burnings, more controlled burnings. There's also now a certificate program in controlled burning. So hopefully more California politicians are listening and will follow Florida. Let's move on to observation number 4, Madonna. Now this one will be short and sweet. You may have heard that Madonna was recently hospitalized. In fact, I read that she's still in the hospital. She is recovering from a very serious bacterial infection, and we hope her all the best. We wish her a speedy recovery. But in looking at a picture of Madonna today, I can't help but question something. Madonna was so cutting edge when she first came out. Her rise to stardom, it was like bow, bow, bow. She was just breaking all kinds of trends, and her music was fresh. She was just different. She really was a trendsetter, which is why I find it so strange that Madonna, she's had so much work done. My opinion, just looking at her face, I don't understand. How do you go from being a woman, being a person who sets trends, who breaks molds, and because you're older now, you feel you've got to follow everybody else? You feel you have to try and present yourself as a person, 30 years younger? This one particular picture that I saw of her, it just made me think, like, you're not some young ingenue. You're Madonna. You're the trendsetter. I just think she missed a wonderful opportunity to blaze another trail. She could have continued influencing her fans. Those same fans from the 1980s who dressed like Madonna, who wore their hair like Madonna, those are the same people who would have watched Madonna as she aged naturally, beautifully, and would have felt a lot more comfortable. I think it could have helped to lift some of the pressure that so many women face. All right. One other point on that, though. They did say in that very same article that her ticket sales have been slow. That's for her new Celebration World Tour. See, I'm thinking your authenticity. You traded it in, girl. Okay, and now we move on to observation number 5, the last one. And you know what? I started out by saying I had 4, didn't I? Okay, the 5th and final observation, it is about Joe Biden and his commencement speech to the graduates at Howard University. I think most people have gone to a graduation, and sometimes the commencement speech is wonderful. It's just motivating. It can be funny, so inspiring. Other times it's a little bit of a snooze fest. There are times when maybe it's a famous person giving the speech. And then other times it's just a regular person like myself. I've given a commencement speech. But the thing I think that is really important is that when speaking to these newly minted grads, that you give them something that they could take with them. I just feel that way. You want them to be, just confident that there's something great out there waiting for me. And I mean, I'm not saying be corny, be hokey. Hey, guess what? In just a few minutes, the graduation fairy is going to come by, pick you up, and fly you to your favorite job. No, but something that inspires. So the reason this became one of my observations is because I was listening to President Biden with his commencement speech to the grads of Howard University. And it just took me aback. It just took me aback. That's just the best way for me to say it. He did have one or two lines in there that could only be described as motivational, but just like a line or two. But the gist of the commencement address went like this, and I'm going to read 3 or 4 quotes. Here's one. I don't have to tell you that fearless progress towards justice often meets ferocious pushback from the oldest and most sinister of forces. That's because hate never goes away. Stand up against the poison of white supremacy. Stand up against books being banned and Black history being erased. And sinister forces are trying to reverse racial progress. Talk about a downer. Talk about a fearmonger. Talk about stoking fear. And I would imagine that for some students, when they hear a message like that from the President of the United States, it stokes anger. They become angry. And the idea that he would tell them that hate is never going to go away, that they're after you. Basically, they're after you. Wow. Way to motivate, Joe. Way to motivate. But this is actually something that I'm not all that surprised by. I don't want to act like I'm really surprised because I'm not. Even NPR made a point about the tone of the speech. And here's what they said. And I'm going to read to you a direct quote. And I cannot believe I have quoted NPR twice. But they said that President Biden used the commencement address to appeal to younger Black voters, quote, offering a preview of how his campaign plans to regain waning enthusiasm from a key demographic. And that's because Biden's support among Blacks is now at 60%. There's even one poll showing it at 58%. That's down 30 percentage points from an all-time high of 90%. Now, I mean, that could change. It may very well change, but he's not taking any chances. And he's going back to the old and very, very familiar playbook, particularly when it comes to Black voters. Let's stoke the fear. Let's tell them about how the enemy is out to get them. Let's get them angry. Let's really get them fearful. And there it goes again. So, tell you the truth, I was not surprised at all. Disappointed? Yes, but not surprised. But this led me to dig into the old video file and come up with something that really makes my second point. Here's the other reason why I'm not surprised. One is politics. But two, I don't know what it is. President Biden, he just cannot contain himself, control himself when it comes to talking with Black audiences. We've seen this time and time again. And please, no eye rolling. I'm not trying to go down a political path. I'm just stating the obvious, stating the facts. Not just the commencement address at Howard University, but when he was with Charlemagne, the radio host. Well, you know what he said, that if you didn't vote for him, you weren't Black. Who else would you say that to? No one else. When he talked about President Barack Obama, then Senator Barack Obama, he said, we hit the jackpot. Finally, we have a smart, articulate, and clean African American. He just can't contain himself, so I'm really not surprised. But as I mentioned, I dug into the old video file, and I just wanted to bring this video up. Of course, you can't see it, but we have the audio. And the reason I want to bring this up, this is the one where he mentions corn pop. And everybody's talked about corn pop. And even when people were doing so, I didn't care about that. That wasn't the real story there. The fact that Joe Biden talked about being tough, and he's always talking tough, and this really tough black guy, corn pop, and how he basically chased him away, that meant nothing to me. This is the thing that got me. If you watch this on YouTube, and it's up on YouTube, it's going to remain on YouTube. Initially, he's in Delaware, and initially he's speaking or plans to speak to a group of adults. But he does something. He calls the children over. They were at the pool, and he rounds them all up, and he wants them all to stand behind him or stand around him, as he said, stand around me. And this is what bothered me most about this whole story. Listen to this story. And I cut it up because it's long and it's rambling, but it's basically the same theme throughout the entire story. So I'll give you a few snippets of it. I am saying there's no way in the world he would have spoken like this in front of any other group of American children. There just isn't. Just the tone, the subject matter, this curse word, he wouldn't have done it. But oh, what difference does it make? I mean, where are they going to go? What else can they do? They'll be right where I left them, or right where we leave them.
I was one of the guards, and they weren't allowed to. There was a 3-meter board. And you fell off sideways, you landed on the darn cement over there. And Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys. And I did. And back in those days, to show how things have changed, one of the things you had to use, if you used pomade in your hair, you had to wear a bathing cap. And so he was up on the board, wouldn't listen to me. I said, "Hey, Esther, you, off the board, or I'll come up and drag you off." Well, he came off, and he said, "I'll meet you outside." My car, these were all public housing behind it. My car, there was a gate out here. I parked my car outside the gate. And he said, "I'll be waiting for you." He was waiting for 3 guys in straight razors. Not a joke. You know the chain, there used to be a chain that went across the deep end. And he cut off a 6-foot length of chain. He folded up, he said, "You walk out with that chain. And you walk to the car and say, 'You may cut me, man, but I'm going to wrap this chain around your head.'" I said, "You kidding me?" He said, "No, if you don't come back." And he was right. In those days, you used to remember the straight razor. You'd bang them on the curb, get them rusty, put them in the rain barrel, get them rusty. When I tell you get off the board, you get off the board, and I'll kick you out again. But I shouldn't have called you, Esther Williams. I apologize, but I didn't know that apology was going to work. He said, "You apologize to me?" I said, "I apologize for that, not for throwing you out, but I apologize for what I said." He said, "Okay," closed the straight razor, and my heart began to beat again.
Now, granted, there were some adults that were laughing. I thought it more of a nervous chuckle, but that's really not the point. The point is, why would the Vice President of the United States of America tell this type of story to a group of young American children? It just begs the question, why? But that's just one of my many observations. Now, a couple of podcast notes. Number 1, if you're enjoying the podcast, let's grow the podcast. Continue to download new episodes and share. Number 2, this part's on me. I have my YouTube page up and my Facebook page, and you can find either at Deborah Rose Podcast. That's DeborahRowe_S Podcast. However, this weekend, I'll spend time putting content up on both the YouTube and the Facebook pages. So we're getting closer and closer to a place where you can do your feedback, and we'll eventually get to talk with one another.
And remember, kids, only you can prevent wildfires.